Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome to another Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It is episode 240, and if you hadn't figured out what we're going to talk about tonight, it's 100% going to be taxes. And the sad thing here is that even in this environment, people still are not denying Trump. And I don't know what to say. But without further ado, we'll bring in the co-host for the evening, Mr. Christopher Hansel and Greta Hanna, and Buddy the somehow cold elf, even though it's not cold in any
Canadian?
sort of climate that any of us live in. That's
So-
I guess my house because I'm wearing a sweatshirt.
last week? You guys asked me what the hell a toque was, and this is a toque.
Okay, that's not. First off, that's not a toque. Let me correct you. Like, if you're gonna be, part of this, you can't use fake words.
I have all the words. Okay, I have the best words.
Doesn't sound like it because in our world, that's just a winter cap. If it didn't have the little
How dare
puffball
you.
on it, maybe you would call it a beanie. I don't know.
Behold the pom pom. Stand before the pom pom. Love the pom pom. Love it. Love it. Anyways, that's toque. And that's what I was trying to find last week, but I couldn't because it was sitting on a shelf just out of reach.
Starting to sound like an episode of Fargo.
Kinda.
I don't know what three of those words means.
Anyway, all right. So we have actually quite a bit of agenda to cover tonight. I think I overbooked us for the show, so we'll see kind of how it goes. Keith and his tallness over there will, have to lead us through our first segment because our first segment is answering Republican questions. So Keith had a good one come in to him. Now it was a little Canadian. So we decided to be more skeptical, right, and say, how can we apply this to whatever country that includes the United States?
Yeah, so instead of it being specific, it was we generically modified it. Generically modified questioning period. Anyways, so the question as we came to it, we worded it was, how can you support the Democratic frontrunner after the scandals and deviation from the standard party line? And of course, the question was asked in a Canadian way about a recent scandal involving Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party and a particular charity, and conservative asking us how can you still support him after that, blah, blah, blah. And my response is that because he is not Aaron O'Toole, he is not Andrew Scheer, he's not Stephen Harper, he's not Doug Ford, he's not Jason Kenney. Because at the end of the day, I actually supported Jagmeet Singh, who was the front runner for the NDP, which is the further left of center party than the Liberals. And I actually didn't want to vote the Liberals. For me, it was just the most strategic option because where I live, the NDP federally had such a low support level of support that it made more sense to vote Liberal, because at least giving more ammunition to the best chance against my enemy made more sense politically speaking, because as we've seen, not voting for Hillary Clinton means Ruth Bader Ginsburg gets replaced by Betty Sue, who is part of some crazy Catholic group that is basically taking pages and inspiration from The Handmaid's Tale, quite
As far as
literally.
I know, Margaret Atwood wrote The Handmaid's Tale using the group that she's part of as a part of an inspiration. Not so much the other way around. Like that group helped influence Margaret's perspective for writing that book. Like it's some scary stuff.
Either way, it's horrifying. And
Mhm.
to flip the question around would basically be to imply that I assumed that the conservative frontrunner had a shred of dignity and even cared the slightest little bit about being seen as a hypocrite. Because as we've seen time and time and time again, every conservative leader, I mean, almost every single politician faces some sort of scandals. And it is up to the supporters to hold them accountable, to hold their feet to the fire. But we see countless scandals under Trump. We see daily, hourly scandals under the current GOP leadership that do not mean anything, and their supporters still dig their feet in deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So the question is never really asked in good faith. It is simply trying to goad somebody into an emotional response, because that appears to be the only way to reach conservative base, is through emotional appeal, as opposed to genuine thought-provoking rhetoric and question and answer and analysis of ideology. It's more about, yeah, well, that guy's a poopy head, so I'm not going to vote for him. Idealism, or not idealism, populist opinion matters more than actual fact checking, because you can fact check Trump all you want. Fox News is still going to sit there and kiss his ass until the cows come home, and then beg him after he gets mad at them for being the slightest bit critical of him to come back and praise us, daddy. Come, daddy, praise us. And now I've grossed myself out and need to drink away that memory, so I'm going to go drink some bleach.
I don't know. So
Right.
like the entirety of that entire question can be applied to everyone who's ever run in any party ever. Replace Democrat with Republican, replace liberal with conservative, whatever your party title is. Like, can you put your candidate through a purity test that is so ideological and pristine, and they never do anything wrong? Okay, so that's the only way you can get a candidate in. Like, it's not possible to have someone that pure and that perfect. They do show up from time to time, and they only have a couple of blemishes, and they've been around for 30-something years, and they've always been on the seeming right side of history. But those aren't the people who ever get elected into office, because you know what I mean? But in the end, like, it's the same kind of situation I had for any kind of scandal leading up to a election. Is, can this one mistake they made, is it big enough? Is this a fundamental flaw in this person's character or in this person's politicking to cancel them, to say, nope, that was that big of a deal? I can count, on my hands a couple of times when I was like, I'm not really sure if I want to do this. Drone strikes from President Obama, deporting large record numbers of people for President Obama, creating a fake war for President George W. Bush. Like, those are things that are like, I was a centrist in the middle, didn't really care too much. But when we basically had confirmation that there was like a fake war under false pretense, like, that pushed me away from them forever, completely and totally. But like the charitable issue, we're talking, like, as far as I can tell, for what Justin Trudeau had, it was essentially some small things that had to do with charitable giving and who was getting monies in certain situations. Is that what it was?
I haven't even actually fully looked into the whole scandal. I tuned out of politics for a couple of days last week, because after the Breonna Taylor thing started and I started seeing the conservative talking heads do their bullshit, I was just like, you know what? I can't right now. I can't listen to that bullshit for much longer. I need a few days away. So mental health, one out the day.
Yeah, but in the end, like, this is going to be like a nitpicking thing where it's just
Yeah.
like, I don't really like this. This was probably a bad decision strategically and public relations wise. But is it like, did they find dead bodies in the charity? I mean, like, how big of a deal is this? And in all reality, it's probably something that was just a bad decision, and people make bad decisions. And did he come out and apologize? Did he take any form of accountability for his mistakes, or did he just say, just fake? You know,
Um,
it's like that's a reaction I don't see Justin making. I mean, the beard says yes at all times.
yeah, Trudeau has every time he's been under fire has come out and said, "Yeah, I did that. It sucked, and I'm sorry that I did that." Yeah, I just did a quick googly, and yeah, the problem is that it looks like his mother and brother were paid for speaking events at this particular charity, and it totaled it wasn't even $300,000 over 2 years, and I mean. There might have been some political favoritism going on, but I mean, come on, look at the conservatives. Who's paying them? Like Andrew Scheer stepped down because it was found out that he was stealing party money to put his kids in private school. Anyway, sorry, I'll stop taking up your time.
Yeah.
Well, I think, on my side, I guess I'm not probably much different than everybody, but I think, and this kind of leads into a whole different, segment, right? We have a whole, sorry, I have gnats for some reason. All these
I know,
damn
I can
assholes
see. I
in
was
my
like,
house.
"Are you in? Did you get your mosquito netting out? Are you traveling in the
I feel
savannah
like-
right now?"
I
It's
got,
gonna be
I
like
got,
the
I
National
got like
Geographic
500
video when the
apples
bug
in the
lands
house
on
right
the
now.
eyeball and like walks around. You're like,
What's wrong with
Anyway.
you?
Moving on. So my response actually kind of comes close to Dan Carlin's response. So I gave the team a little bit of homework. I'm guessing Hannah didn't do it because he never does anything I ask, but we'll see. There was a podcast that came out, and I don't know if anybody knows who Dan Carlin is. And we've talked about this on the show before. We haven't in a long time because he really doesn't do political podcasts. He still has a history podcast, so if you want that, it's really amazing. It's 100% worth a listen. But it's strictly history, and that's his background. His background is history. He's a historian, and then he takes that and actually applies it as a political pundit, and he did that for so many years. After Trump got into office, okay, we'll go back a little bit because it's been a while since we talked. High-level snapshot, Dan is a big proponent of essentially wanting an outsider candidate no matter what, i.e. Bernie. We'll just pick on Bernie because even though he did not endorse Bernie, he supported a lot of what Bernie was supporting. He thought Bernie should be a lot more tough on his anti-war stance. He wanted Bernie to be more separated from Israel, those type of things. But he wanted an outsider candidate because he can't stand this establishment two-party system. And if you listen to the show, you probably know that we're all very similar to this, except for Keith. He might not quite be as much. But for the most part, we're all very... that's kind of our stance. I mean, Hannah and I, voted for Bernie more than one time. We've openly advocated for even people like Andrew Yang, who have a very outsider stance. Yeah, that's not relevant anymore. You got to cross it off and put, I guess Biden is what you should write on a Sharpie.
That's what I was
slap
gonna
it on the
do
back
on-
of your car.
He'll do.
I was gonna do it on my
Biden's slogan.
yard sign and stick it out front, but
Anyway, so Dan Carlin has always rallied against establishment politics. And when Trump came to rise, he kind of was very upset by that because that was not his thing. He was like, this is not what I signed up for. Like, I want an outsider candidate.
I wanted.
Yeah, but he's like, what the hell? Like, this is ridiculous. This is insanity. And the big thing here is that he rallied against Trump before Trump got in office, after Trump got in office, and then he just gave up podcasting because he's like, if I can't predict this and give you good advice, what good is it for me to even have a conversation? So he's done 2 podcasts this year alone. And let me share my screen, I guess. Hold on. So he's done 2 podcasts. One he did very recently, where essentially he talks about Joe Biden and his decision to endorse him, right? Which is crazy because him endorsing Joe Biden is completely off-putting to some extent. It's off base. Like, I get his point. But, so he spent essentially a whole podcast talking about why we can't have Donald Trump, why we can't have Trump in office any longer. And I guess I'll give this is I identify very closely with this. Weirdly enough, and I'll be honest, politically, him and I don't agree. I'm a lot farther left than he is. But in this sense, I do agree with him when it came to his analysis of Trump, because his conversation, what he's telling people is, he's like, you want an outsider candidate, great, but you have somebody that wants to destabilize the actual federal government. He wants to destabilize, and I say that slowly because that has to sink in. We've never had a president ever say they will not step down peacefully from power if asked. Now, we've never had to ask a president before. We had to ask this one, and he's avoided answering the question. Now, that should be scary to any person that doesn't want an authoritarian or authoritarian dictator or a civil war, period. Now, Dan wants to walk around and tiptoe around the Hitler references and things like that. And that's fine. I'm all for full bore with, Trumpian, very close to being Hitlerish in some of the demographic. Now, we can also say some of the Bernie bros were kind of similar to that, but none of them had power. None of them were advocating violent removal or falsifying votes. We've also never had a president that basically said voting systems could be fake and not work if I don't get elected. Ever. No one said that. Ever. Nobody has tried to disband. And for me, and I'll tell you what, like, this episode came out last Monday. I'm waking up at 7 a.m., roll over, hit my snooze button, and I roll over. 5 minutes later, I get a notification from my podcast app saying hey, you got a new podcast. I literally just spent the next hour and a half sitting at my computer working, listening to it. And then in the afternoon, when I didn't have any more meetings, I did the exact same thing. like I just went back through it again. And I guess, when we talk about, go back to that Republican question of how can you support somebody that has been caught up in political schemes, has voted right of the Democratic establishment recently, and over time. He has never been just a baseline Democrat. He has definitely been to the right. He does do centrist things, don't get me wrong, but if you look at his history and his voting record, he's just a little bit better than Mitt Romney. We'll just call it that. And that's not saying very much. So for me, when we talk all about why I don't support or how I can support Biden, it's because I need the quickest path to removing that individual sitting in office, and I'm willing to do everything short of going to war, though that might be an option. I don't own any guns, so somebody will have to loan me a couple of guns here. So, short of going to war, and essentially short of cheating the political process, which neither one do I want to do. Neither one. I can't vote for anybody that doesn't have a high probability of defeating Trump. I just can't. I don't give a fuck. Fuck your third party vote. I'm sorry. You can have it in 4 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it's come down to. Is so like the start of this conversation was basically, is there some small thing where somebody did something wrong? It was a mistake. Money stuff, people taking big piles of money for speeches. It's just icky. It's just icky. It's always been icky, and I've never been able to be like, why, whatever. So there's that. It's easy to create some kind of a rule saying you or your family cannot profit off of an office until you're done, you're gone, which is one of the reasons why the Obama family is now immensely wealthy. They are able to go into all these sectors where they were able to make a lot of money really quickly. The same thing with the Clintons. The same thing with, it was like W just disappeared and started painting because everybody was worried, thinking that he was going to become a war criminal and be tried for some of his,
He's working on putting stuff on his fridge, crayon drawings.
But in the end, we're looking, those cases there were like, those are a bunch of things that we don't like, and it's difficult to qualify some of those things. But like in the end, those people were part of the American system. and they tried in their way. They thought they were doing the right thing in some cases. Maybe some cases they really did know they were doing something wrong. But like in the overall picture, if you average them out, they were average trying to do things for the better of the country in their perspective. I really do think that Donald Trump is like he is completely a different type of person than anybody who's ever been in this level of power before. There have been some people in politics like Newt Gingrich and stuff who would be a Donald Trump, but just they had like a measure of decorum. That's why I've been saying since the primaries that I haven't attacked Joe Biden since the day he was nominated. Actually, since basically there was a guarantee that he would have the nomination. I have not attacked him. I haven't gone out of my way to support him and say he's the greatest dude ever, but I have not attacked him and said one disparaging word. And it's all about getting Trump out of office because with the things that have come to light in the last few days, I mean, he could actually be potentially looking at criminal law problems. And the only thing keeping him protected is this semi-complete immunity that the presidency seems to get. I mean, the things that he's done would put other lesser people in jail immediately, but using his power and abuse and stuff like that. So like those are things that are unforgivable in my opinion. And so like Trudeau making a mistake, taking money he probably shouldn't have, that's a PR mistake. That's not a good idea. Other politicians doing something similar, getting caught, don't send dick pics to young kids, I guess. Anthony Weiner and like the serial shooter. But like
Carlos Danger.
that is yes, old Carlos. Like those are cancellation things. You do something like that, you are canceled. And like Trudeau making mistakes, that's not quite a cancel, but it could hurt him in the next election. And people are like, is he profiting? But Donald Trump literally is trying to destabilize the country in order to maximize the total profits gained, because there's a good chance that if he doesn't, he might go under. So like anything he can. So have you guys seen the movie Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler?
No.
That's the president.
Nope. I'm not. I gave up on Adam Sandler after about 25. Sorry.
I have watched. That's the only movie of Adam Sandler's since Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison that was a watchable movie, and I'm telling you, it was good. And it'll make your skin crawl the whole time, but it's a good movie. But if you watch that movie, the incessant and uncontrollable impulsive behavior and things like that is Donald Trump. Like there's like someone who doesn't have that moment where they're analyzing the situation that they're in. And so like he's done so many things that are a direct response to that. It's terrible.
Yeah,
It really is.
when you bring up the fact that he was joking about, or he made those comments about not leaving peacefully, I had a bit of a mixed response on that one, because on the one hand, everything the guy does is trolling. It seems everything he does is just him trying to bravado his way around, and either and I guess I wanted to be a little more charitable, but I also realized that when it comes to his administration, you cannot assume the best. There is none of what you refer to as decorum amongst them. It is literally all about winning, being the winningest of winners who ever did win a winning, and that's all he cares about. And the best case scenario for him
say
making
that 10 times fast.
Winning a sweater, whoever win that wing.
Wiener. I just hear wiener every time you say that. Say it a little bit faster. Come on.
Got a wiener. The most charitable thought that I had on that was that all he was doing was basically trying to make himself look good, that, when he had to leave, he would just basically be like, you know what, guys, I'm just going to be a better person and leave. That is literally the best thing I could see him do. Is I could force my way back here, but I'm just going to be a better person, just to kind of continue endearing and pandering to his base. But let's face it, his base wouldn't matter. No matter what he does, his base is going to support him. So at best, you have an authoritarian wannabe here, and he's just testing the waters. And it seems that the GOP is looking for any chance to monopolize and take over everything so that they can keep absolute control. I mean, now,
Well,
like
they
we
get
saw
one more Supreme Court justice.
exactly when Mitch McConnell,
Then they'll
with,
finally have gotten what they need, and Trump will be disposable, hopefully.
I mean, yes, but also still scary shit because
Yeah, no.
that's
He's taken over the party, though. It's no longer the
Mm.
GOP. It's the Donald Trump party. It really is. Like the
Yeah.
number of people that are like posting about it's great that he didn't pay any money and all these things like that. And it's just
Yeah.
like the behavior that they would have absolutely dogged a Democrat for doing,
Mhm.
monopolizing and utilizing the systems. So
And that
I don't
right
know,
there is
there's nothing he can do. I mean, there
Mhm.
really isn't. His old saying, as crazy as it is, that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Like it almost it could be true.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I mean, to some extent, it has to kind of be true because I mean, who's paid more than $750 in federal payroll or federal taxes in the last, I don't know, 20 years of their life? Me, since I've been paying taxes,
Oh,
I've always
God.
paid more than that. I can't even imagine paying only $750.
I've already paid more than that this year. I've probably paid more than 2 or 3 times that this year.
I pay that a month.
But
And
that's
you guys
just
got low taxes in Canada.
no. Well, I just don't make a lot.
Oh, okay. All right. Never mind. You're giving it
So,
away there. Never mind.
That's what that is. That's
I would say my payroll tax is a lot more than that, but you know,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I don't
usually
make
hit
that
that in a
much,
month.
but
yeah. I actually haven't looked at how many taxes I paid. I just know that I've definitely paid a shit ton more than that, and that's just this year. Yeah. How did your president get away with not paying taxes? Essentially.
So the basic argument that he had, and for the gist for most people that don't really know yet, is that he lost $1 trillion or a couple $1 billion or something like that. He had to literally list $1 billion of losses, and when you lose that much money, you're able to write off those losses in real estate and stuff like that, and you can actually defer your taxes, and you can write off. It's a tax write off, and so he got, by losing so much money in the Atlantic casinos and a bunch of the resorts and stuff that he had that failed, that he was basically able to just write off all of his taxes for the better part of a decade, and in closing in on the 15-year mark. But also what he does is all these things where, since his family and all of these people that are really tightly knit in a little tiny group are employees as well, like his daughter got in one single lump sum, it was $750,000 in consulting fees that he was able to write off as a business expense. So he transferred $750,000 of money to his daughter Ivanka as a consulting fee that he could write off and not pay taxes on, essentially. So like there's all kinds of things that people do when they move money around. They talk about essentially how he built his campaign, how he built his empire is with the money that his father and mother had, and how he had basically worked around their will and the money that they were going to be getting. He went through so many ways of getting that money from his father's estate to him. All of these things, like they always complain about the estate tax and having to pay money from your parents' money to become your money and all that. All this stuff, like his empire, if it's even really an empire, has been formed in like tax loopholes and stuff. And so like that's what they've been doing this for years. But most recently, it sounds like he's in litigation right now for $72 million, I believe, in overage of claims on taxes for rebates. And if he loses that, he will owe roughly $100 million or so to the IRS. And like this is massive, giant chunks of money. And so like that's the basic gist of like the New York Times stuff that came out not so long ago.
yeah. So this just came out
Mm-hmm.
like the 27th. So this is pretty recent. And Mike brought up a good point. I guess last time during the debate, I didn't know this. His response was by avoiding taxes, it just means I'm just smarter. That's crazy. I didn't remember that.
His base actually believes that, though. They believe that not paying taxes makes you smarter because they have the value system that taxes equals socialism equals Satan.
Mm-hmm. But as they say, their argument is that everyone tries to pay as little in taxes as you can. And so my argument then against that is that when you file your taxes and you have someone come over to help you on a project and you say that maybe the project was $10,000 worth of stuff, but you're going to write off $50,000 in consulting fees for that person helping you on that project. That's, you're lying on your tax forms. Like, would you do that so that you have a huge return at the end of the year? Would you do that? And most people would be like, well, no, that's a little bit too much. And I was like, that's what we're talking about. It isn't that you're trying to use the system and the rules to save as much money and get a nice return. It's these actively inflating and overestimating by massive amounts the amount of money he spent that's able to be written off so that he gets huge piles of money back. So he takes, as a rich person, he takes from the federal government all his money because he's lying about the amount of money he A, spent, or B, is worth. And all of these things are the things that you do that are a felony. It says it on the stupid sheet when you send it in. If you do not speak the truth in this form, it is considered a whatever level felony. It says it right on there. And the CPA has to sign off on it if you have a CPA do that. And so the CPA is also responsible. And so, like, the CPAs, the lawyers, all the people that he's doing all this wrangling with, they're all in on this thing of just massively inflating values and costs and what you can and can't do. And I mean, that to me is just icky, and it sounds like you wouldn't do it personally. You would do a little bit, like maybe I can stretch that a little bit, but like you wouldn't go egregious because you'd be worried about getting in trouble. I mean, isn't that what usually keeps you from doing something massively illegal?
Does me.
I mean, the number one crime deterrent is the prospect of getting caught. That's what I learned in my psych classes, so it makes sense.
Oh, they brought down the biggest gangster. Capone was brought down by the money trail. You can't get away from the money trail. You can't hide it. He's been in audit for 15 years or whatever. No, you've been sued by the IRS. It says it right there. As president rages re-election campaign, polls say he is in danger of losing. His finances are under stress, beset by hundreds of millions of dollars in debt coming due that has personally guaranteed. Also hanging over his decade-long audit battle with the IRS over legitimacy of almost $73 million tax refund that he claimed. Like, the adverse ruling could cost him $100 million. Boom, one big chunk. And he owes, they say, over $400 million that are going to be coming due very soon. And they're the kinds of loans when you're a corporation, you take out loans and there's interest payments or whatever, but you don't pay it like you would a mortgage, essentially. It's just you pay interest and then lump sum money's owed. And so basically you can get a huge loan for a massive project. Let's say you have a $10 million job. You need to buy $1 million machine. You take $1 million loan off of the machine. You pay whatever fees on the loan there are. And then at the end of the term, that $10 million job has hopefully come in. And now you have the cash to pay that whole machine off all at once. Or you pay it upfront completely and whatever. But it's like, this money is money that's just been waiting and the deadline's here. And I mean, that's why I said the Uncut Gems movie, because that's what Adam Sandler does, is like hustle. I mean, it's just a New York hustler, and that's what Trump is. That's what he's done his entire life, and he's had so much money that he's never gotten in trouble for it. That's just really what it feels like. And this thing from the New York Times is the most clear and concise explanation of that I've ever seen. I mean, this is a really, really detailed article. I don't know. How much have you gone through it, Chris?
I've pretty much read, I'm going to say the majority of it. I'll be honest. There's a couple of parts I skimmed. Excuse me. This is a very long article.
Yep.
I mean,
it's huge.
I will tell you, this is probably one of the longest
bigger than his hands
I've read in a while. but I have gone through quite a bit of it. Some of the history and some of the like gotcha type things I didn't care for as much, right? Because whatever. I mean, to me, it is what
you
it
can
is.
cherry pick data.
Mhm.
It's the New York Times. They're going to cherry pick some data.
Well, they're the failing New York Times for a reason, right?
Mm.
I
They're
can only imagine.
somewhat failing. They
Except
keep
that
asking me for membership, so maybe they are failing. Like, I
they're
don't
not
want to
as
pay your membership.
they're clearly not as big as a failure as him, but
Yeah. So this is where they talk about the reelect campaign and blah blah blah. I mean, we kind of already covered that. What they do, that they claim most, if not all, of the facts appear to be inaccurate.
Oh yeah, that he put in
That's
his.
That's what the lawyer is saying. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I don't know. So they're claiming he's paid over tens of millions of dollars in personal taxes. But that's not what the data shows.
yeah.
Right? The data doesn't show that. So we could pick on The Apprentice, for example. There was a total of $427 million, right? He
Yep.
invested the majority of that in a collection of businesses, essentially golf courses, which I don't understand why you want to be invested in that many golf courses, but you do, I guess.
It's the brand. Luxury.
Yeah.
It's a luxury thing. Elite clubs where you can't get in unless you're a paying member.
So he invested all that money. Therefore, he doesn't feel he should have to pay taxes on it. But to me, just because you're reinvesting it, again, I understand what the law says. I get that. But to me, the big thing is that, if you don't want to pay taxes on something, then you shouldn't be reinvesting it in a money-making organization, right? Not that he's made money on any of this, but that's not what he should be spending his money on. So, like, if you make $427 million and you invest $500 million, let's say, in golf courses and this and that, you should still pay a tax on that because that's still an income. Now,
Yep.
If you want to take that $427 million and apply it to, I don't want to say church at all. I just hate saying that word. But, if you were to buy or invest, you're basically buying the church. But if you were to invest in the church or invest in a nonprofit, then I think that I'm okay with that being tax deductible. And I only say the church thing because that's the way the legal structure is now. I personally don't think Trump or they should be exempt, but that's
another
side
conversation.
tangent, and we would spend 20
It's
years
another
going down.
Tanner tangent.
Yeah, well, it's not always me, but anyway.
So one of the things that
for alliteration.
So right at the very center here, this is that little paragraph. It's a pretty good one. So it says the public filings offer a distorted picture of the financial state since they simply report revenue, not profit. This is another major issue when you're looking at, when there's money coming in, gross income versus profit. Very, very different things. If you have $100 million company, but your cost, your cash burn is 150, like Uber hasn't made any money yet. Everybody says this company's worth a ton of money. It has not made a profit. So if you're looking at just gross income, if you're looking at total money in, not profit, that changes the total picture. And Trump claims gross a lot.
Hold on. Is it going to be like one of those movie parodies where like one comic always plays every character and we'll call them the Clumps? Wait,
yeah,
damn it, that is a movie.
It'd be Alec Baldwin doing the whole thing.
The aristocrats.
It's so like anyway. It says on that in that section right there is that Trump announced in his disclosure that he had made $434.9 million, but the tax rate deliver a very different portrait of his bottom line of $47.4 million in losses. So he made 434, but he spent 470 roughly.
So he's not living within his means, basically.
Yeah, so like but he's always done this, and he's always, taken robbed from Peter to pay Paul. That's one of the reasons why this massive amount of debt that he has is a big deal. When you have $100 million IRS bill looming, and you have 400, some places, I think Forbes said that it could potentially be $1 billion in debt because we don't know who he owes money to. So if you have a ticket coming in that has to be closed, and whoever owns that basically owns you. And all we talked about at the very beginning when Trump was running as the Republican candidate was, who does he owe money to? The Deutsche Bank had all kinds of problems, and there was all kinds of massive loans because nobody in the U.S. would give him any money. Who owns those loans? You know what I mean? Because they have massive pull and power over the president. That's why they want to divest and all that stuff. And all this economic stuff is why he's been hiding these tax filings for so long.
Fancy that.
Yeah, and hold on real quick, just to kind of relate to what Mike was saying in the chat. Mike's saying that the IRS don't go after these big fishes, right?
They used to.
They used to, but they don't now because it's probably not profitable to them, right? Now, that may, and I got a quick story kind of that relates to this. My wife's ex owns his own business. So does his father. They've both owned their own businesses. They're obviously not Trump wealthy. Otherwise, we would have received some of that money, right? Like for child support. But they were obviously profitable enough, that they didn't, they didn't go out of business. But his father was being investigated for tax fraud. His father's income for their business was less than $300K, right? And here the IRS are investigating him for tax fraud. And I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. But think of just what Mike said. The gain from going after and the expense for doing that, what is that worthwhile when you have somebody that lost $47 million, supposedly paying no taxes on $434 million? I mean, come on.
But then he got a tax return of 73. You know what I mean? That's what that's like. If you lump it all together, I don't know if that's what it is, but like he basically on paper lost a pile of money, played with the numbers all over his tax return, and then he got a pile of money back from the Fed. You know what I mean? That's what they're saying is like you lost money yet still got a massive pile of money back from the Fed, or didn't have to pay any personal income taxes or any of that kind of stuff. Like that's what it is. And also the idea of the IRS going after the big fish and like covering their costs for that, it's like expecting it's like the idea of a for-profit medical system. Like it's never going to be cost efficient to take care of the poor and the sick. Like it's not. You're just never going to make money on that. The parts of our society that make money have to buffer that because it's going to be tough, and it's not going to be like a factory line where we're going in and we're making more widgets faster. The same kind of thing with the IRS. The IRS exists as a kind of a guide rail for the American tax system. Like if the IRS is out there and there's some danger of antitrust law being enforced, there's some danger of if you swindle it, even if you're a big guy, they're going to take you down. And if they're like, oh man, it costs too much to go after these big guys, they'll fight us in courts for hundreds of years or whatever. But if that's the message, then guys like Donald Trump will just do whatever and they'll run it through the courts and they'll, you know what I mean? Like there needs to be a consequential system to keep the guardrails on, because once you've defunded the IRS and you've reduced the number of people that work there enough, what's to stop guys like Trump from just totally cheating all the time?
Well, I mean, they already are.
I shudder to think about what Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates do. I mean, Jeff Bezos and Amazon didn't pay any corporate income taxes last year. Like, what? They made like $4 trillion or something like that. Like, just a stupid amount of money. So like there needs to be guardrails, and I think that like Trump gets away with this because we've taken them down.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think I guess I would caution you to say Trump's the one that's taken them down. I think the GOP party
he's a symptom.
Has taken this and allowed for this because he's getting away with this well before he even wanted to run for president. I mean, before Obama like made fun of him and was like, you could never do this, and then guess who showed who? Thanks Obama. There you go. I need that shirt. That says,
there we go.
That says Obama challenged Trump. Trump is president. Thanks Obama. That's a shirt. Buy it for me, or maybe we'll put them up in the.
Well, there's always a tweet too. Like there's the tweet that came out earlier today that said Trump was like, Obama only paid 20.5% on his tax return on his tax rate, and
Yeah.
come to find that same year that he was making fun of Obama paying a lower rate because I pay roughly 33-ish%, and so Mitt Romney paid 14% when he was running, and Obama hit 20, and Trump was giving him hell when Trump was paying 0.
Yeah. Well, and
But
if
that's
you look
'cause
right
he's a
here, they
winner.
talk about Nixon, right? You know,
Oh, yeah.
this is nothing. I mean, Nixon was doing similar type things, hence why we want to see tax returns. And I'm happy that this is coming out before the election. And I'm hoping John Oliver dedicates a whole show to this,
Oh.
because if you think we're in depth, that we're nothing like we
Mm.
Oh,
we
hell
don't
no.
have 50 researchers,
We don't have jokes either. Those jokes are so good.
we got jokes. I had some jokes earlier. Come on, Mike
They're
in the
not
chat. Tell us
pre-scripted.
if we have jokes.
I mean,
not
I was waiting to make one that Trump is a billionaire. It's just in the negative billions. That's all. You're welcome.
Not
To
funny.
the jokes,
No,
kids.
no,
Feel free to
not
laugh
really
anytime,
funny.
or not.
So I don't know. I mean, there's so much. There's so much that we could go through here. This is kind of like a little bit different of a timeline, let's say, right? This kind of shows things on a graph, which if you're in Chris's, world, this is where I live. So they talk about income he's made, endorsement deals, money that he's had from investments, money that's been generated, from his own companies. But this is where the losses show. Now, let me explain to you real quick what my company did this year with COVID. We stopped all salary increases for the whole company.
Mhm.
All.
Yeah.
We cut funding to certain entertainment budgets. Obviously, we cut our travel budget, so that worked out really well too. Like our travel budget was like 0. We basically stopped hiring. Only brought temps on for all non-essential positions. We applied for the PPP loan. We did all sorts of stuff like that. And we're now looking at our budget for next year, and we're going to be short on capital. And the first thing our owner doesn't say is, well, I'm going to short our tax returns so we don't pay taxes. And I'm going to look for that, $4 or $5 million tax refund that we're going to get from the federal government. And that's going to cover our losses. We don't look like that because our company doesn't get what this guy gets. Which, if this is not criminal, then let me phrase this. If this is not criminal in what he's doing, it should be. And my company must take the upper hand to not do things like this, because we are constantly looking at our budget every month and every quarter, and we're constantly making adjustments, and we have discussions about what's in it for the next year, what's in it. I had to help predict, I had to pull all these numbers to actually say, this is what our shipment counts are and our shipment dollars. This is where our job profit is based on this. If COVID continues to extend for another 6 months, how much money are we going to lose in these departments, right? You tell me how somebody in his position can sustain, and I'm talking $140 million in losses, and still continue to be in business. How does that work? And if it does, why can't normal people do the same thing? That's
All
a
I can
question,
say-
not a joke.
Yeah, I mean, in all reality, it's playing with the paperwork. I mean, the way that our tax system is set up, it supports real estate. So like if you just by owning a home, so like if I make $50,000 a year and you make $50,000 a year and I own a home and you rent a house, I will pay less taxes than you will. Income taxes. There's a benefit for owning a home in the tax code that say because the American government said that we want people to own homes, buy land, and all those kinds of things. And so these are the barriers to entry for people to own homes and all that kind of stuff. But also this is the American system is set up with a bunch of perks, and if you think about it, it's being made by people who are often former CEOs and people who have been in large businesses and stuff, because how do you amass enough money to become a leader in a group and then all that stuff? So like, it's written by people who are, if not at the top of large corporations, they're adjacent. They're part of that club, that culture. And so you can potentially have a society that has corporations that are just burning through money. They still get tax rebates and returns, and they're just it's a non-feasible business system. It's a non-feasible, like, it's literally, if you look at his companies, like, they're almost insolvent in some cases. And so the only thing keeping him alive is often just the brand name that he has. Everybody knows about what happened with the Atlantic City casinos and all that stuff. So like, if he's putting all these huge bets down, but anytime he loses, there's a whole bunch of things that are support to keep him from losing everything. But if a person who makes $50,000 a year makes one mistake, and that mistake, let's say, costs them their job, and they can't get a job fast enough because the market's not doing so good, so they lose their car. And without a car, now they definitely can't get a job. They can't even get a local job. So then they lose their house. Where's the support system? Where's the tax benefits? And where's the benefit of the doubt for those guys? They don't exist. But guys like Donald Trump, who can lose a pile of money and his corporations can almost go insolvent, there's all this stuff that they can use, resources to stay alive. Do this because you've got a CPA who gets paid $100,000 a year just to find the way to maximize your return that year. Like, those are things that they have that the average person doesn't. So that's how they can survive this bloodbath of money loss that you see.
And that's that kind of boils down to the adage of, the rich stay rich, the poor stay poor, is because it is so expensive to be poor. Because as you said, as a person making, a modest means of like 50,000 a year, you lose your job, you're out of work for just long enough, suddenly you can't afford a car, so now you're less employable. Now you have to cut back on some basic expenses. You might have to reduce living expenses, cost of living expenses, or take out more debt that is going to take you even longer to pay off. Whereas with somebody who like Trump, who has the ability to diversify a portfolio, which is actually a proven method of not only winning at the markets but staying ahead, is by not just investing in one particular type of thing, but investing in a broad variety and having several different sectors, and being an investor of certain different multiple different types. You're going to be basically covering your ass from so many different angles that no matter what you do, you're not poor. You are never poor because you always have some other contingency plan that is inaccessible to anybody who is poor. And that's the problem with this whole wealth gap, is that
you can make
sure,
mistakes when you're rich. You cannot make a mistake when you're poor.
Exactly. And that's the system that we live in. And that's the frustrating thing, is that so many people who are in that vulnerable spot where if one thing goes wrong, their life is ruined, they still say, you got to live within your means. And that's why I've
like that thing up on
really
there.
been at odds with myself to maintain
it says to demonstrate that he was far more successful playing a business mogul than being one in real life.
Yeah. I find it very, very ironic and find it very difficult to maintain a human attitude and approach to a lot of the, we call them the rig pigs, the roughnecks in Alberta. The guys who went and they spent all their money on their big trucks and toys and all of that. And then when there was the oil bust a couple of years ago, suddenly they're all going broke, and they still have that libertarian hyper-capitalist mentality of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you got to live within your means, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it says the guy who hasn't had work in 3 years because you focus only on one thing and you think there's only one way for you to make money. Well, sorry, bro, but maybe you need to work on your whole self-awareness thing. And at the end of the day, it is so bloody expensive to be poor. I mean, I was talking with one of my friends about this while we were out shopping a couple of weeks ago. Is when you can't really afford much, but you're blue collar, you'll buy items of lesser quality because that's all you can afford. But you're buying so many of those items per year. Like, we'll take steel toe boots for example. Hannah, you're familiar with how much a good pair of steel toe boots cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't afford that, you can get cheap steel toe boots, but they're not going to last you nearly as long, are they?
No.
No, they're not. So if you buy 3 pairs of steel toe boots in the same amount of time that a good quality pair will last, well, guess what? Those 3 pairs are going to cost more than that good pair. So already you're paying more money. It's looking more expensive to be poor. So there's a problem there. And guys like Trump are the embodiment of that problem because, as you know, as Tanner it just showed us, you don't have to be a good business person. You just have to play one really well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what capitalism's about. It's not about being good. It's about pretending you're good.
Yeah. And so I want to point something out a minute that I think is very interesting, right? So I'm not going to give Clinton any credit, but I'm going to say this is the era of Bush, right? From here to here.
Yeah.
And
2008.
watch his income. I mean, and again, I don't think his income had anything to do with Bush. That's not what I'm saying. But see his losses. So his business, he's almost bankrupt. His businesses start taking off. He's not losing a lot of money, but he's still losing some. Then notice right around here, after we've had 8 years of GOP Mandarin, where I'll be honest, I can't remember if all 8 years were specifically a complete red House, Senate, and president, but I'm pretty sure 4 of them were.
4 were.
So watch here and see all of a sudden his income goes up, and then all of a sudden, right around 2008, we start seeing him taking bigger losses. Right now, I'm not going to say
2008.
I'm not going to say that this specifically.
Crisis.
Well, it is. It is. Yep, is some of that's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say specifically it's because he was doing better and he found a new loophole. My belief is that through here to here, and we could do this research. Maybe this is a buddy task for next week. We do the research where we say, hey, between here and here, what laws were passed that allowed for this to happen?
Between 05 and 08?
I'm going to say all the way back between 01. I'm guessing if you look at how long it takes a law to become a law, right? I mean, isn't there a Schoolhouse Rock about that?
Yeah. Well, from my basic understanding, is there wasn't a whole lot of tax reform during the George W. Bush stuff because there was so much warfare and things that were happening. And Trump had a huge hit in both investments and in The Apprentice. Like, those are massive, massive wins that have just him rolling the dice. And then if you think about the real estate market at that time, 2005, 2008, it was going crazy because of all of those low cost and inflated and terrible real estate loans that are out there and mortgage flipping and all this stuff where everybody's playing hot potato. What's Trump's business? He's in real estate. So, like, of course, his real estate, like from 2004 to 2008, there was just a big giant real estate bubble. He got lucky with some investments and with TV, but like the Trump businesses are real estate businesses, and all that stuff was really inflated. And then 2008, it fell through the floor, and maybe his businesses specifically didn't drop, but all of the other companies that service mortgages did, and that just tanked investments, that tanked everything. And so you look at his investments. I mean, those just went down to nothing almost for gains, and the real estate market just hammered. And so in 2012, I believe, was about as bad as it got. I think that was pretty much the end. He continued to fall because he's in the industry of entertainment. And I don't know if you remember around 2012, 2015, there wasn't a whole lot of entertainment happening because everything was just kind of bottoming out still. So like, the downturn on there is like someone who has their investments so much in real estate and in finance. Like that's what a lot of really rich people's finances looked like. They lost piles of money, but since they had such a large pile from the beginning, they were able to weather that storm.
And that's why, the whole idea of a flat tax where everybody pays, the same percentage of tax
is ridiculous.
Really, it's not.
Well, it's a
Exactly.
progressive system that
It's
we
bullshit.
currently have now.
It's just like it's just a centrist circle jerk, really, to think that a flat tax makes sense. Because you take somebody who makes $50,000 a year versus somebody who makes, we'll say, $500,000 a year. 15% of 50,000, that's still 7,500. So they're left with just over 40,000. But you take somebody who makes 50,000 or 500,000 a year and pay it, they still pay only 15% of their taxes. That's 75,000. They're still bringing in over 400,000. And that's why you cannot have a flat tax, because that still keeps that wealth gap nice and big. And that's why the only people who really want it are libertarians.
Yeah, in the end, the flat tax and the progressive tax system is the better system. We have all these ways of bypassing it. Bernie Sanders put out a post, and they said that in the last, I think it was 15 years, the top 1% have skipped out on paying $800 billion in taxes that they would have paid if the tax laws weren't in such a way that they are now, including the most recent tax referendum that was done, passed by the Republicans and by Donald Trump, that made it even easier for them to save money. So I don't know. That's like, I mean, this isn't really like a referendum on the tax code itself. It's kind of him using these rules as they are, which is the Republicans who are saying like, oh, he's so smart because he's using the system as it is, but the system is fundamentally flawed, and people taking advantage of it like that is unfortunate. And so I guess it looks like right here is just the Apprentice is like his big deal.
Yeah, essentially, and what they're talking about is the amount of money he's making, right? So they talk about investments, they talk about the fact that he was allowed to keep half the profits, which is I don't know how you negotiate that. Like,
nobody
he's not
thought
a
that it was
good
going to be a big
orator.
show. Nobody knew that it would be as big of a show as it is, and he, always being the hustler, was like, I want half or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Gotta get half.
yeah. Because if it fails, whatever. But if it succeeds, look how much money he made.
Yep.
Exactly. And so this is literally just going through the amount of money he's made, different areas that he's made it in. I mean, again, to me, this is kind of a worthless discussion, about how much he's made. I do think it's a little interesting that, the TV personality gave him that. And I would be interested to see if anybody ever did a write-up on Reagan, to see if he made this kind of money from, his stuff before he got into politics, and how his taxes flushed themselves out as a comparison. Because I think he's got to be the closest comparison we have, modern day, technically. I mean, there might be some before that, but he's really the closest comparison we have to a TV celebrity. And because obviously before The Apprentice, Trump was only a celebrity because of his father. Nothing he did was so successful that it put him on this big map,
Well, besides, there's a whole bunch of stuff where he used to call into Forbes magazine and pretend he was someone else and inflate his value so that they would put him on the top 400 richest people list. Because once you're on there, now you're in the special club and you get into all the special things. Like, it's all hustle, man. It's all about the show. That's why TV is naturally a place where he gravitated towards. But
yeah, I mean, and so this, like I said, we spent a lot of time on this. This is very detailed.
Yes,
I don't really feel the need to kind of.
Well, everyone can go and read this, because we're not going to be able to give you any more information, like, besides maybe our personal opinions on this information. Like, this is just data. The one thing I really wish is the New York Times would either review their sources or they would actually post the information. I haven't seen that out yet, so we need to essentially fact check the fact checkers here. You know what I mean? We need to actually have someone who knows the law. I went looking
for his returns. They're nowhere to be found. Like, they don't have that.
Yeah. So since the actual stamped stupid piece of paper isn't online as a downloadable PDF that people can see, we don't know how much of this information is completely and totally trustworthy. The New York Times putting out this big of a thing and taking this big of a swing this is this is the kind of thing where it's been confirmed quite thoroughly. But in the end, the only way to absolutely know for certain is if this information comes out into the public forum, like the actual tax returns. However, the New York Times got access to them. Maybe not reveal their source, but the information that they used to base this information on. Like, that's a necessity, because we'll never get it from Trump while he's in office. It's just will not happen. Because the reason why is because all this information that comes out here, it is, it's a destabilizing thing for his campaign and for his image and all that stuff. Although it won't shake too many people. I don't think this is any new information that's going to change people on either side, because everybody's so trenched in right now. But it just, I don't know, man. I just really want to like have some kind of confirmation, some kind of fact checking, maybe a whole group of fact checking websites. They said, we all looked at this, and we are all in agreement that this is a confirmed data set.
Can we get shirts or slogans that say, but it's taxes?
Can we?
I think we can, but they're not cheap. My buddy, his wife's a graphic designer, and she was making some stuff for her aunt that said "Fire the Liar," making these huge bumper stickers. And like I was like, man, that's a huge bumper sticker. I'm not putting that on my car just because I guess I like risk, but that's a big risk. Like, that's a pretty big risk. Give me a sign, I'll put it in my yard. I'm okay with that, but not on my car. I don't want to get pulled over. But just thinking
or
of
have
that,
someone key your car in a parking lot.
Or that too. Well, my car's worth nothing, so if they did, it's like whatever. The best thing would be if they set my car on fire. I would get more money out of the insurance for it being parked. Like, if you hit me while I'm driving, it's worth nothing. But in Michigan, if I'm parked and like you hit my car, it's worth. I could sue you. Like, everything changes. Even with no fault insurance, it didn't matter. You drive, you're screwed. Not driving, there's some money in it for you. And I had this because I was at work, seeing that there's Tangent Tanner coming back. But this was years and years ago. Where I worked before didn't have a set parking lot. It was just a big open area and then like the front of the store. And there was a guy that had like an extended cab with an extended bed. Like, this thing was huge.
Limousine.
And he backed out and backed right into the front of my LeSabre. Dead serious. Like, took out both headlights, the grill. Luckily the engine was undamaged. It was all just like structural type thing. And they, so like, but the insurance company had to pay me out, and so like they like, well, you don't even have full coverage on this thing. I was like, yeah, I don't care. He backed into my car in a parking lot. For Christ's sake, why should I have to pay for that? Like, I get it if I was taking the risk of driving, fine. But I'm not. Like, my car is just sitting there. You have no right to do that. And so we had to we didn't go to court, but I had to have my insurance companies basically send them a summons saying this is what you're going to owe us. And they fought for me, and they basically gave me like $3,500. And you know what I did? I went to a mechanic that gave me aftermarket parts that were unpainted, or they were painted, but they were not the same color. I had a 3-color tone, or not Bonneville, LeSabre. You know why? Because I walked away with $2,000 in cash. Like, you can't beat that. There you go. I can't get 770 million. Huh?
I'm smart.
I'm smart. Yeah. I can't get that out of my taxes, but I sure as hell could get it out of an insurance company. And I'm probably going to get all sorts of hate mail for defrauding. That's pretty unmoralistic of
There's
me.
a statute of limitations, but it's all like that. So like,
thank God
there is, but like it's the way it is. Is everybody does a little thing, you'll push the boundaries a little bit, and like in all reality, there's nothing that you did that was unethical there. Your vehicle's worth a certain amount of money. It's been destroyed, essentially. The insurance company values it, and they have button pushers who could, if they really wanted to be thorough, would go in and say, well, this car only needs $1,000 worth of repairs, whatever. And they didn't do that. They just, so like the same thing, the tax code and all that kind of stuff. Like, it can't be perfectly thorough. But for a party that loves to say that we don't need a central government bearing down on us, we don't need this police force, centralized tax system. We're part of a meritocracy. This is the democratic United States of America. and we'll do the right thing. People will do the right thing, and they'll pay their taxes. They'll be truthful on their paperwork. Oh wait, so that's not they're idolizing a guy who did all of the little cheats and then cheated like a pile more. So like they're idolizing a guy who will not do the right thing, who isn't part of the meritocracy, isn't part of being like a good citizen in the social contract. So hypocrisy 101.
There you go. Welcome, forks. Welcome,
Forks.
forks. And
Welcome, forks.
spoons.
Spooning leads to forking, kids.
Nightmare.
Anyway, yeah, so I agree with you, and I think that's kind of the underlying tone of this. We could get into it, and to answer your question, Mike, yes, they do have think tanks and different things that do debunk these things. They obviously have not gotten around to it. I do caution, I guess I'll be a little skeptical here and say that we want to be very careful which ones are critiquing it, because there is a lot of moving data in this analysis, and the New York Times, I think, did an okay job, but like you said, we have no sources. Hannah and I can't spend the next week and take a whole week off and spend online time together dissecting this because we don't have the data. And that might be fun. I'll be honest. I do this kind of for a living. I dissect that data. I'm a data analyst. So like,
the
like
data
this.
that they have written, but like they have like the original OE data,
Yes.
the original manufacturer. But
yeah, give me all of that and let me put it in a database and run it. That's what I want to do. But we don't have that. So I want to be very cautious if these big think tanks come out. Maybe we should we should ensure that they're not being funded by the Trump administration.
well, like the New York Times obviously is got a bent left, and then the think tanks, the Heritage Foundation, all that stuff, they have a bent right. But if you have everyone do the analyses, and all of the left think tanks and the left news media organizations have all of this information, and they thoroughly go over it, and then the right think tanks essential is all of this information looks fake, like that's the extent of their argument at the superficial and surface level, then you have to make a decision, and that'll be the case. And so if there can be some really solid arguments as to what the New York Times got wrong here, if they cherry pick too hard, but I mean, this is, like I said, it's such a big swing that like you don't swing for the fences if you're not pretty certain you're going to hit something pretty thoroughly. Like, because I mean, a massive mistake like this could turn the New York Times into the failing New York Times.
Well, I mean, according to Trump, they already are.
Yeah. So
They have been for as long as they've been critical of anything he says. So there's that.
Anyway, speaking of new, I don't know how to transition that. Speaking of being critical, science is coming up. Remember I used to do that song? Maybe I should bring that song back. That science song where we used to dance to in the background. I don't remember. It's science time. No? All right. Moving on.
Bill Nye the Science Guy?
Nope.
No, he had a little song. It was like the science, like it was kind of like a super clip of song. I can't remember entirely. But yes.
Anyway, we're gonna move past that, I guess, because I'm the only one that remembers that. So so there was a article that was shared with me, from somebody that listens to the show that said, "Hey, you guys do vaccines. You talk science sometimes. I think this is a good article. Will you present this?" And so I'll be honest with you, because some of this I wish I had Abby, because this makes more sense. And this is an older article, but they're talking about some of the more recent FDA approvals to use some sort of drug that I'm not going to say.
Gardasil.
Gardasil. It's Gardasil. It's Gardasil.
Yeah.
Come on.
It is
The
not a
B-side.
spice.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
It's a spice of life. Come on, man.
Oh God. Yeah, technically not wrong, I guess.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, it's help prevents cancer. Anyway, so HPV is a disease, and a lot of people thought this specifically only affected women, right? I mean, they did not extend this to men. They didn't extend it for anybody. And the idea here is that they've done quite a bit of research, and they're saying some of these vaccinations might actually be beneficial for both sexes. So, Hannah, do you know anything about HPV or any of
Yeah.
that stuff?
Yeah, it's a human papillomavirus. It's a pretty big deal for young women, and it's associated with cervical cancer. But what I had been told a long time ago, and the information in here is a little different now, but that men were carriers and
Yes.
could essentially give it to women, but it wasn't something that would hurt or affect the male immune system or anything cancer wise. But it says on here that now they believe that this virus is actually associated with several other forms of cancer affecting men and women. So having boys wouldn't get this vaccine, but girls would get it when they were, I believe, just starting the puberty ages or so. 9 to 26, so a little bit younger than puberty for girls, but that was what it was approved for originally for females, but now it looks like it's approved for males as well. And I mean, if it's something that can prevent cancer, and it's a pretty thorough representation of the populace that's been using it, and they have seen HPV related cancers and HPV related issues go down significantly. So it's an effective vaccine as well. And this new information, they're extending it out to older people, and they're saying boys and men should get it now. This is new to me.
Well, I remember hearing, like, to follow in the same vein of when you were mentioning that, men and boys can be carriers of HPV, although they may not necessarily be affected. One of the conversations that I had heard was, for that reason, would it not be also a wise idea to include the men's age group? But I never really heard much follow up on that one, because the next conversation I ended up, of course, hearing was a whole lot of anti-vax bullshit.
Or that by giving this vaccine to young girls, it would make them more sexually active because they wouldn't be worried about getting
crap.
HPV.
I have
heard
repressed that memory.
I actually heard that more than I heard the anti-vax stuff, because this vaccine came out a little earlier than all of that autism related stuff from that fake and debunked and completely retracted scientific drivel.
Well, there was, I guess that didn't really have the same steam. That just was more of the conversation that I had heard. But like, that has been around for a while. It's just maybe I just spend more time around conservatives who are all, no, my body.
Yeah, that too.
Needles, big pharma.
Mormons dying of blood transfusions or the lack of them.
Yeah, but what was interesting is that they're saying that men could actually get this, and it would help with overall cancers. That HPV is actually an underlying trait to some extent, right? That affects cancer in, everybody. And I think the big thing here, and this is why, again, there's not a lot of meat to this article, but the big thing here is they're talking about a vaccination that is beneficial for everyone. And I think it's interesting because of the fact that, and this is on my agenda to talk to my doctor about, but it's interesting because if you use alcohol, you have a higher chance of getting cancer, right? And if you use alcohol the way Buddy does, which is 7 drinks every night, you have an even higher chance of getting cancer. So therefore, being able to get this vaccination, that could generally help.
Well, as far as I know, the vaccination, what it's doing is if you have, it'll prevent you from getting HPV. And when you have HPV, you are more likely to develop some cancers. And so what it would be is that if you had HPV in your system, and let's say the particular form of cancer that would be formed from drinking too much has some kind of connection to the cancer that HPV could potentially influence, then it would help that. So like, you have to have HPV or be for this potential for the potentiality of getting these cancers. And so it's a correlation maybe, but I would say that it's probably a long-winded correlation for the alcohol and HPV connection. What I would say is that if you get HPV, you can potentially get these other forms of cancer that they never thought that men would be associated with, but now that they think you can get it, the vaccine can protect you from getting it, but I don't know if it can actually cure you if you have it. You know what I mean?
It can't.
That's what so like it's a thing that like we need to inoculate people to try to minimize the number of people that have this.
It's about preventative medicine, basically.
Yes. And so like if you have it, you now know that you have HPV. You also now have more information that you are potentially in a higher risk pool now to get certain kinds of cancers, and you monitor that. So like this is for people who may have it. They don't know they have it because who cares? It wasn't going to hurt you before. Now there's a vaccine that can potentially prevent your sons and daughters from getting it. And if you have it, then you can either protect yourself from getting it, or if you have it, you can be aware that there's a potentiality for certain cancers. Like all of this information here is just good information because we now know more.
Exactly.
It's great to learn because knowledge is power.
Some days it is.
Other days it's a curse, like Thanos said.
Yeah. Well, if you could snap your fingers and make all the Republicans disappear. Ooh, did I say that? All right, hold on. We got to rewind that. Don't put that in record. Don't put that in record.
It's okay. It's all
Anyway.
fictitious. So
I'm voting for mosquitoes to go away.
I would agree with that too. I hate mosquitoes. I can't sit on my front porch in the fall and enjoy it. Like it's like you got to put those stupid bug things up, and they never work. And
Or
you
do
got to
the
spray
chemicals.
yourself, and it doesn't work. And so then the next morning you wake up hungover, and your foot's bleeding or has like this like big wad of like mass on it, and you're like, what the fuck's that? And you're like, oh, oops, I guess I got drunk and like was itching the mosquito bites way too much. There you go, overshare.
You burned your house down because you were going to be a super citronella, and you had like 87
No.
candles.
No, that's 100% not
using
happening.
citronella to do satanic rituals.
No, that's what the goats in my backyard are for.
Neat.
All right, let's move on.
Do we have to?
We do.
Because
Yep.
I know it's about to come, and my brain has already started like twitching and convulsing in response.
So I don't know. All right, so I guess hold on. Before we get into correcting misinformation, last week the verdicts came out, and out of all the police officers involved in the Breonna Taylor death, 0 were charged with murder, and 1 was charged with reckless endangerment
For
of the
missing.
neighbors. Other neighbors just shooting wildly, which, like, I didn't know that happened, so that's even crazier to me. Like you just sit here. The logic of any of this is beyond me. At some point, and for whatever reason, my one Facebook comment or meme just took off this weekend, which spurned the desire to have this because I had a friend send me this link, and he's like, "Hey, if you're going to discuss it, here's a great article, and yes, it's an opinion article, but here's a great article that goes through the different steps and the different phases of these people's denial." And this is so let me state this. If somebody walks into your house and does not announce who they are and is not in a cop uniform and has
That's
a
a
gun
bad one.
drawn, and you live in an area that is probably not the greatest, what is the probability that you're going to open fire on somebody aiming a gun at you? Hannah, go.
100.
All right, buddy, go.
I mean, I'm not as confident as Hannah, but it's pretty good.
Give a number. Come on. It's no fun without a number.
75?
All right. In my case, it's 0% because I don't own a gun. So like,
I have
got a
paintball
baseball bat by
guns.
my bed, but that's about it. You know?
I have long rifles that don't take too long to load, but it's definitely a cumbersome creature. But in the end, but the concept is basically that do you have the, if you have the means, and if the argument is that, so let's say this, I'm going to be a criminal and I'm going to break into your house and I'm just going to yell, "We're the police, get down on the ground." And I'm in my blue jeans and a t-shirt and I'm kicking your door in. Are you going to assume that I'm telling the truth? Probably not. And then if you're like me, you're a deaf person, you're standing there naked and you're holding a rifle because someone's kicking into your house, you're just going to hear while you're shooting them. It's just like the whole concept of there's an argument of whether or not they announce themselves or whatever. But in the end, like, you don't know truthfulness. You're, even if they do announce themselves. So I'm sure there's going to be something in the article that will cover that situation. But in my opinion, if you had the means to protect yourself, knife, chainsaw, shotgun, whatever you're going at, you're going for it, because it's, at that point they have a weapon on you. You don't know if they're just going to shoot everyone in the house or not. You might as well go down in a fight. I mean, you hear
that was a firefight.
So, anyways,
so the charge that he got was wanton endangerment.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. Just I couldn't remember the legal term, but that's the legal term: wanton endangerment. Now, in my opinion, at that point is, if you're shooting at somebody, isn't that just wanton endangerment of itself?
Well, her
right?
boyfriend opened fire first, according to.
But if you walk in a house with guns drawn,
I know, yeah, I know.
I mean, like, should you not get shot? I mean, like, I'm sorry. If somebody aimed a gun at me in my house, I'm going to grab my baseball bat and lunge at them and let them shoot me and hope that the fatness of my body can knock them out. That's what I want. Like, there you go. I'll be dead, but you will also be on the floor, and hopefully my kids and my wife can escape.
Well, it's not particularly wanton endangerment, mostly because these cops are going under the cover of legality. They believe they have a warrant. They believe they're at the right place, judge and all that kind of stuff. And so they aren't thinking in that. And then when you're fired on like that, like, instinctual thinking is something that is, some people haven't experienced it. And it is an interesting thing where you will do a series of things without thinking, and oftentimes you become aware of the event after the event. And like cops in training, like, it just goes into that fight or flight mode, and you go into those things that have been trained into your head. And this guy didn't even do his training right, because apparently he was just missing everything and shooting through walls and windows or whatever. Like, just really poorly done. So. But
so these people are claiming this was not a no-knock warrant. It was, though.
So this is an argument that people are saying?
Yes. So here I'm sorry. Now we're moving. I'm transitioning a little bit. We're very poorly, but I'm transitioning. We are moving into now, like, some of the counterpoints. So these are things people were complaining at me about, saying you don't understand, and so one of the complaints was, well, one witness said that they heard them announce themselves. Well, everybody else said they didn't. Well, it doesn't matter, because one said they did, therefore that's good evidence. A bunch of people saying they didn't hear it isn't good evidence. Another one was the discussion about whether it's a no-knock warrant or not. That was a big discussion. So I kind of want to go through some of this because, and again, this is very long, and we're not going to spend an hour on this. Don't worry.
We have to get to bed eventually.
Well, we don't. We choose to go to bed. You don't have to do anything. We can stay up all night.
You can tell my wife that.
Okay. All right.
Oh yeah, you're out of reach. You're not afraid that she'll kill
come
you.
To America. We might take her in. She can't get back, though. Once she leaves, she's not going back.
Yeah, that's...
They'll be like, you're tainted. You're part of Trump's America now.
Oh, God. What have I done?
Anyway, so they talk about what type of a warrant it was, right? So the idea is that they did authorize a no-knock entry for them, right? And they essentially they did it based off like a cookie cutter warrant, template. And I didn't know these things exist. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense, right? In my world, I want to do no knocks, or not no knocks, templates, so I can reduce the amount of time it takes me to do something. But they essentially use this template, and then maybe it was wrong. So the court essentially said that no-knock warrants should be granted when police can present evidence that a particular suspect is a risk to shoot at police or destroy evidence. Well, guess what? They didn't present the evidence.
No. What?
So then the police claimed
my shock
that they were
taste.
told to disregard it, right? They just were saying, hey, she's a soft target. She's not a threat or a major player. If she is not a major player, why not surround the house, get a megaphone, ask her to come out with her hands up? I'll actually even go one further. Why are we not just waiting for her to go to work in the morning? Why do we not know her schedule? Why do we not know the fact that, maybe if she's going to work every day, we could go to her work and have a conversation and arrest her there? Because by the way, the probability that she's going to throw a fight or try and shoot somebody or her current boyfriend will kill anybody is so low, it's not even funny, because he ain't going to be there. He ain't going to be at the hospital. So now tell me, when we have somebody, and this is what pisses me off the most about this whole thing, is the pure fucking fact that if she is not known as a suspect in the investigation, nor is she currently with the guy, and which was known, why in God's green earth are we charging into her house? Now, I'm not going to tell you it's racism that they did this. I will tell you it is shitty police work, and they should be held to a standard.
That's kind of what it is. So, like, if you think of this whole situation, they went in and they basically used a warrant sort of wrong, but not completely wrong. I mean, the whole system is designed to protect them. And so even though everything went horribly, horribly wrong, they still came out was like, hey, they were doing their job. They made a mistake doing their job. So why should they be personally held accountable? The Breonna Taylor family made out with a $12 million payout, I believe is what it was. And so, I mean, you can't really put a price on someone's life, but people that are going to be arguing for the police are going to say, listen, they compensated you for this horrible event, but cops can't be perfect. And so when they're not perfect, they can't be held personally accountable. But this case is a pretty egregiously poor one. That's the argument, is that this is something that was bad enough that it should have crossed the line of negligence and actually become prosecutable.
Yeah. Then you have the fact of the one person, and this is what pissed me off, and Dallas stuff, fuck you if you're listening. I'm going to call your ass out, and you can fucking suck it, man, because you are a horrible human being. I gave you the evidence, and you don't even care to respond. You literally glossed over it. Here, you want to claim, oh my God, there was a bunch of people that might have said they didn't hear anything. The one person that did say they heard it said there was also a lot of commotion, so maybe nobody else heard it. Right? So it'd be like if I'm walking down the street and a marching band's behind me, and I'm screaming, "The end is near! The end is near! Do not eat the pie that Trump gave you. If you eat the pie, you're poison. It's a John Jones situation." Right? Does that mean that I was not advocating for it? No. But at the same time, if I'm being drowned out and I'm not consciously aware of that, do I not have some fault in the fact that I'm trying to spread a message? And maybe that's a bad example. I'm trying to spread a message, and you can't hear me, right?
How about this for a possibility of what happened and maybe how this guy heard somebody? They kick in the door. They don't say anything. They kick in the door. The arms drawn, guns drawn. The boyfriend comes out with a gun. At that point, someone probably said, "Put the gun down. We're the police." You know what I mean? They probably said something like that. because there's a gun in the dude's hand, and then he fired, then they fired. And so let's say in that commotion, in that bang rang that was happening, that someone probably yelled, "Where are the police?" To get the guy to put the gun down. But the reason they do the no-knock warrant is to just catch everyone off guard so they don't barricade the door and start burning papers or whatever inside. So
Yeah.
they're inside. The entire situation is there. They see a potential suspect. They pull the guns. Everybody's got their weapons out, and they yell, "Put it down, we're the police." So it's possible that there was an announcement made, but it wasn't before the door was breached.
Exactly. So that's even a bigger problem, right? So then we could talk about, did we pound on the door, right? They claim they pounded on the door. Therefore, it's no longer a no-knock warrant, right? This is not how you conduct raids, right? Again, could you sit outside and scope them out? Yes. Do you really need to raid a presence that you don't know what happened, right? And so this is claiming that the police simply pounded on the door for 45 seconds and didn't announce themselves. Because again, we only have one person that heard them announce themselves. Think of it, how fearful you would be if somebody was like pounding on your door. You don't know whether they're trying to get in. You're sleeping. How about that? Even this, you're sleeping. You start hearing noise. Again, I pose the question to Hannah.
Yeah.
If you heard somebody beating down the door,
I
would
wouldn't
you
hear
get
them.
up and you might not shoot them, but would you get up with a gun in your hand?
They would get into my house and they would shoot me because I wouldn't hear it, more than likely. But
Okay, all right. Oh, come on.
but in the
All
end, the thing there for like
Would
the
your
police,
wife do it?
the police, yeah, she'd hit me and then I'd be confused and then I would be shocked because I had no idea what she was doing. Because it's really hard to play the someone's trying to kill us charades in the dark in the middle.
All
of the
right,
night.
all right. That's fair.
Anyways, the argument that no, the cops banged on the door for 45 seconds. I'm a police officer. I need to get into this place. I need to arrest this person. I have a warrant, and on my warrant it says no knock. I'm not gonna bang on this because this guy could be like, "Screw all y'all," and just start firing through the door. Like, it's just a dumb thing. It's a bad argument, and the cops never would do it. Either they would knock and announce themselves and barricade the place up, or they're gonna kick the door right on in and use the element of surprise, which is the whole point of the no knock. Like, that argument is just it's a dumb thing to say out loud for a
The
human.
next one is if they couldn't hear, like you said, you wouldn't hear. The whole point of a knock and announce is to provide ample notice. So was there truly ample notice? And I think this right here is the biggest tell why they should be charged with something, right? More than wanton destruction. This is why they should be charged, is because if they knew this was no longer a no-knock, and they were truly treating it as a no-knock, you would not knock for 45 seconds and then walk into the house with guns drawn. You wouldn't do that. Why? Because it's not a situation any longer. And this is where the racism card kind of comes in. They knew the people in there are black, at least one of them. They knew they were in a bad neighborhood. They made generalizations and stereotypal assumptions there you go, Keith, new word for you. They essentially are coming to a conclusion before they enter the building. So even if they
people will believe us,
45 seconds, even if you gave that, and if you did yell clearly enough, which there's no way, because I'm going to tell you right now, in an apartment, if you knock on a door, and my buddy and I did this because, well, we've been drinking, but we were at his house, and he lives in the bottom of a house that's like it's got a bedroom, a kitchen, dining room, living room, all in one, and a second bedroom. And he went into the bedroom, and I beat on a door. And you know who didn't hear me? Him, right? You know why? Because he's in a bedroom. He's got a fan running. Who knows all the different things that could happen here? But here's the deal: if you want to give ample time, you don't beat on a door for 45 seconds and then open it up with guns drawn. Why do that? If you think it's that dangerous, why are you going in there anyway if she's not number one suspect? Again, I get it. If it's Osama bin Laden, hey, I understand the logic in it then. I don't agree with it, but I get the logic in it, You tell me why you did this.
I've seen training.
Would you tell me what it is you do here?
I don't know. Tell us, buddy.
Oh no, I forgot that not everybody gets Office Space references like that.
Yes. Yeah, I do
I have
nothing.
people skills.
I do
I'm
nothing.
good with people.
Yeah. But and that's part of this is so botched and this is so poorly done. And so was that one here asleep in her bed when she was shot. She was not. And that's something that I have heard people say, that she was shot in her bed sleeping. And that's obviously not the case because there was gunshots before she was shot. So, anyways,
Yeah.
that's another important one. But in the end, like all of the scenarios leading up to this, like the whole idea of not escalating and not causing a violent confrontation, like that's what cops are supposed to do. They're not supposed to escalate. And this is everything about this scenario was either botched so poorly that it was without a doubt going to escalate into somebody doing something horrible. But like, also, did they know about the boyfriend if he's in there too? So I don't know. Breonna wasn't shot in her bed, and the man that shot the boyfriend at the police was her boyfriend. And so the ex-boyfriend was the one that was implicated, not Breonna and not this dude.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, they just didn't know anything. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Again, we talk. So John Oliver talks about reform, right? And that's the best way you can look at this, right? I want people charged? Absolutely. Do I want people held accountable? Absolutely. Here you go. Should the judge be who signed the warrant not be to blame? Absolutely not. He should know. You don't sign warrants that frivolously, and if you are, we got problems, right?
Mhm.
We have problems if a judge is doing that. In these southern states, and in these, and I guess it's not just specifically the South, but in these states where we have a more racist bent, you're going to get this type of a thing. And I get that it's somewhat natural because of the fact that we're all humans and we have biases and racist tendencies, but it doesn't mean you should not be held accountable for when you make a mistake. Again, if a cop wants to walk out and say, I hate all black people, okay, great, blood on you. But the first time you shoot a black person, you should be 100% tried and you should be gone after, because it's like, hey, you can't make these statements openly and think that we're not going to think you have some implication you're going to do this, because statistics show exactly that. If we all are a little bit racist to some extent, right? And those of us who grew up in more racist homes or had racist friends have higher racist tendencies. I won't tell you that I didn't graduate high school with people that use the N-word on a daily basis, right? Back then, I didn't think nothing of it, sadly enough. And I have to admit these things because they really bother me. Like, it's things like, my wife has pointed this out. She's like, when we first started dating, you had like 4 or 5 friends that use that word on a daily basis. Yep, I did. And that's my bad. And we're not friends, very close friends with these people anymore. For a reason, and now they've all changed their stance and they're all on the opposite side of the fence now. But at the exact same time, it's still like, that was part of my upbringing. I was raised, and there was a very specific bent in the community I grew up in that leaned towards racism. But it was more about a power struggle for them than it was truly about hating somebody that was different than them. They didn't want to lose their power or their belief system set or anything that violated their norm. But when you have a judge that's in there, your job is to be impartial. Your job is to do what we pay your motherfucking ass to fucking do. Now I'm getting...
And there's our R rating.
I hit it a long
We've
time
had it
ago.
for a while, yeah. In the end, like this is a judge poorly doing his job. These are police officers poorly doing their jobs.
Yep.
They should not be able to be judges and police officers anymore.
Well,
Only
no,
one person in this entire thing is not going to be a police officer anymore.
It's
So,
kind
like,
of
we
in
hear
the,
about those things, like they'll get fired from one police department, and they'll get a job at another one. So, like, the systemic problems where this isn't like a thing that's weeded out. These bad apples hang around for a while, and so that's a major problem. That this doesn't. This is a good example of it. It's something that has not been solved.
and it's kind of in the job description or the job title to be a judge. You kind of have to judge things, not just sign shit willy-nilly simply because you're lazy and can't be bothered to go through all the legalese. I'm sorry, you get paid
You
a
should know
lot
that.
of money. You went through a lot of schooling in order to read legalese. You should have no problem seeing that as a part of your job. You know, that's
know the
kind of what
Supreme
you get
Court
paid
decision.
for.
Like, it's the Supreme Court said you can't do that. You should know that one.
and yeah, and it was just absolute poor execution on the police officers' part, because they clearly had no evidence to get one, so they should kind of know better.
Yeah, like we're
But
talking manslaughter cases. I mean, it's
yeah,
not premeditated murder, but this is definitely getting to the point where a life was taken erroneously and maliciously. This wasn't
mhm.
this isn't like an accident where, like, oh man, we accidentally killed someone.
And
Like, the situation, the whole scenario was funneling them towards violence.
and what really bothers me here is the simple fact that, you know, nobody, like, on the right, nobody was saying anything, none of this bullshit. None of them, not the Tommy Laurens or Matt Walshes or anybody like that, none of them had anything to say on the subject because they were in the wrong. And it wasn't until that suddenly it came out that her ex-boyfriend was a drug dealer that suddenly, oh, well, now it's justified. Fuck you. Fuck you all. Fuck you straight the fuck to hell, whatever you think it might be. I cannot stand that attitude, that whole blissful ignorance until suddenly you have a convenient outing. Like, first of all, the association with a drug dealer, that does not merit a death sentence.
Yeah, you're
Being
not
a
the
criminal
judge,
does
jury, and
not.
executioner all at once.
Ex-
It's confirmation bias. Once you find the thing that you're looking for, now your argument is confirmed. You get to be right. It's a sad thing that we see, and everyone has these bents. But the people that are pundits in some areas, they're really bad. They're really bad, and
It's
so apologetics for this particular case is
and the
particularly
post hoc
disgusting.
reasoning, the post hoc rationalization, we see it all the time. As
Mhm.
soon as, you know, the unarmed black person gets shot, well, you know, they were reaching for this, they had this prior, that prior. I mean, Kenosha,
He had a hoodie on.
there were all these that suddenly it came out that, you know, this guy did that thing to kids and this guy did that thing, and it's like, yeah, no, those are terrible people, but they did not. First of all, they got shot by somebody who had no idea what the fuck they were. So while you want to sit there and think that that's a happy accident, all it would have taken was a 1 degree angle twitch for that bullet to hit somebody who is completely innocent. And that's all it takes. And it is not an ends justify the means. You know, we don't have Sly Stallone sitting here going, I am the law, and all of that. But this is, we need to stop seeing this type of mentality. That mentality is the problem, and that's what's so goddamn infuriating. That's why I had to take a few days where I literally just did not check my Twitter or my Facebook, because I was like, I cannot deal with this garbage, this post hoc reasoning off of something that they've been ignoring for months, and now that they suddenly have a convenient little argument that really is not an argument, but really just a cop out, because now they suddenly have something to say, so they're just going to shout it from the rooftops because they finally can contribute to a conversation without looking like a total asshole, or even having to deal with the slightest little bit of cognitive dissonance and the discomfort that comes with. No, they didn't say anything, and now that suddenly she has dated a drug dealer in the past, which, I'm sorry, who was in high school and didn't know a drug dealer at some point, or have a drug dealer in their circles? And don't give me none of that Catholic high school bullshit. We all know that there were a lot of those in high schools. So just want to point that out. You anyways, I'm now my words are just all like having an orgy of anger, so I'm just gonna drink and let Tanner take us away.
Yeah.
So the last one I'm going to point out, and there's so many more. The last one, I'm just going to skip past that. The last one we're going to point out is people, and this was an argument that was used to me by my grandfather, for Christ's sake, right? If he hadn't shot at the cops, she'd still be alive. So I get that, right? But at the same time, is you tell me how that's logical. Again, they didn't hear whatever the answer was. They asked, who's at the door? They want to know all these things. So if Walker reasonably believed that the men breaking into his apartment were not police, he did have a right to defend himself and Taylor. But here is the point of my contention. And this is where I get angry. And this is where, when we talk about it, and this weekend, my buddy and my wife had to like pull me aside and be like, you understand you're kind of going off the rails here. You want a revolution. You want civil war. Do you really want that? Are you sure you want to go find a gun and get on there? This is what pisses me off, to the point of wanting a revolution where we do rise up and get rid of some of this, because this is disgusting. I don't give a fuck if you walk into a house and start shooting at somebody and you are a cop, you can get away with it. That's how the law works. That's how disgusting this whole thing is. And when we talk about how angry we get and how fired up we get about these things, and I know I'm one of indefinite passion, especially on this subject. But for fuck's sake, you tell me how the fuck you can walk into a house in plain clothes, and I don't give a shit if the guy's a drug dealer. I don't care. The only constitute that I would care is if they were running a child sex trafficking ring and they were actively filming something in the basement. Then fine, walk in plain clothes and start killing people. Don't care. But until then, fucking tell me how you can walk into any drug dealer's apartment with plain clothes, no cameras, no hats, with your guns drawn, and not expect to get shot. And I don't give a fuck if her current boyfriend did deal drugs. I don't care. It is inconsequential, because you don't walk into somebody's house, and this is what pisses me off about the fucking right and the fucking goddamn libertarians, is these are the people that should be standing up and saying this is fucking wrong. And yeah, maybe the law works like that, but it shouldn't. And this is how we're going to fix it. Because for fuck's sake, when it comes down to it, somebody walking into your house, you're going to shoot them. They got a gun. And if they can get away with killing you because they're a fucking officer of the law, then at this point, it's no longer you're here to protect me or protect the innocents and protect the people and give justice. You're now here to say I'm above the law, and it doesn't fucking matter what I do because you can't get me for it. And you know what that fucking sounds like? King fucking Henry and his goddamn crew of people that slayed people in England. It sounds like fucking Caesar. That's what the fuck this shit sounds like.
Beware the Ides of March.
Yeah. You feel better, Keith? Are you happy you joined me tonight? Do you want to feel my pent-up anger? And I'll apologize without trying to go on a further rant, because I know I could see Hannah's eyes rolling and glazing over, and I don't mean for
They
that.
are.
But you understand where the passion comes from, and this is where we have to, like, and maybe this for me. Maybe this is the call, right? What do we do? You know, boys, we're sitting here having a conversation, right, about how wrong this is. What are we gonna do? Yeah, we can vote for Biden. Is that going to fix this? I don't know.
Hell no.
No,
It's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough to fix this.
So tell me, and this is where and I'm not drunk yet, so at least you don't have drunk Chris, because we used to be pretty drunk when we did these things. So at least you don't have drunk Chris anymore, because you tell me what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Because in my world, this is an unacceptable atrocity. You can't have these type of laws that exist. And we could talk about Trump not having to pay taxes, and yeah, that's disgusting. But Trump hasn't killed anybody specifically with not paying taxes. You can't tie it directly to him. I can tie the murder of Breonna Taylor directly to these cops and directly to the laws that have sustained them. So what the fuck, boys, are we going to do? And we're not fuck boys, sorry. But
I mean, the question is incrementalism versus revolution. So the idea that the system, the government, the powers that be, our representation and government can overcome these changes and make things better in the future. And then the other thing is well, does it take a revolution? So if you look at the progress in the history of this country, it's been ugly when we did make big changes. We made some big ones. It was nasty in the civil rights. It wasn't particularly bad during women's rights, but it was nasty during civil rights, probably because the police were a little bit more likely to use brutal force against that particular group of the population. But the LGBTQ community looking for their freedoms and for their rights and stuff like that. Like in some cases it got pretty ugly. It got pretty nasty, and our society saw that and changed. The question is all this stuff that's happening right now, is this a case where it won't be enough? I think in 2020 hindsight, in 10 years, there'll be a lot of changes that happen because of what's been going on. So
Wait,
the only thing I can hope for is that if there isn't another Trump presidency, if there isn't an escalation of the destabilization that we're seeing, then there really may be a case where there's going to have to be maybe not an armed uprising, but people in comfortable houses like us, like that we can comfortably watch from our inside of our houses and look out. We may actually have to start doing stuff in the real world, and I mean that isn't something that's outside of anything that I would do that, but it's it's a big step for people who are not directly affected by this. And I think that the next administration, the next presidency, if the Republicans can maintain the presidency and they can maintain the Senate, like it's such an impetus for any kind of progress. And in fact, it's almost like rolling down a hill for progress. We could see some extensive rioting continue and maybe even get worse. That's what I think is going to happen. Whether or not the incrementalism is going to fix it, I would love to see it work, but we need to hire the really progressive candidates. I don't know if we'll ever do it. That's the thing.
Do you
I don't honestly think that it will get better. I think our society is structured right now to keep a certain group of people in their places, and so like I do think it'll take a revolution. I just don't know if it'll be a bloody pitchfork and weapon revolution, or if there's another way to do it. I don't know yet, but like
step one, as the inner pants gnome would say, is steal the underwear, and then step 3 is profit. So in our case, step 1 is removing Trump from office. Period. Mm-hmm. That's step 1. No questions asked. Not anything. Step 3 is fix things to create a better equality and remove horribly awful laws. Step 2 is where you and I are going to probably disagree, whereas I'm talking of revolution and war. And I feel I'm ready for that. Like I get that the media spurns some of this stuff, but at some point I think when is enough, and when can we as a society finally say we can't sit by and be idle anymore? And I know House of Cards is probably a bad reference to things because of Kevin Spacey's horribleness, but if you look at how that show exposes politics and dirty politics, Trump is nothing any different than that show. He got away with murder, and then the rest of the show spent its time trying to catch up with him, and he was able to outmaneuver it this whole time. And instead of just admitting when we make a mistake or do things that we shouldn't do because we have we have a horrible problem, a systemic problem, and punishing those for it, we're going to turn the tables and say, well, the law doesn't say it. And this is where Dan Carlin and I disagree. I agree with punching Nazis in the face. I'm sorry. I don't care. And I fine, give me my punishment, send me my community service. I'll punch another one tomorrow. And I don't care.
Is it Nazi punching day?
I don't know. Actually, we should have like one day a month where you punch your local Nazi. Like, I think that just should be a thing. And if they're stupid enough to come out, they're stupid enough to get punched. I guess, like, if you're a Nazi and you walk out on Nazi punching day, you just deserve it.
Put on your gloves. It's Nazi punching day. Ooh, can we rewrite the Weird Al Yankovic song? Well, Weird Al, a Weird Al song. Meta.
So I guess my only question is that, so you do the uprising. Just we remove those people. You tear down the system and rebuild the new pieces. But I mean, you have to build the infrastructure to do it. That's one of the reasons why the separation of church and state and all those kinds of things, and all of the power branches and stuff like that. So, like, the revolution to destroy that system, you need the political machines, you need the machinations in order to build the new system that you think would be good. But in order to get to those ends, if the means can be justified, could you have a country that can build those again? It's like we survived the Civil War. Could we survive another one? I mean, those are real questions.
I think so, and I without being the dominant D personality I am, I think that it can, and if we look at the Civil War to some extent, and I think the Civil War had extremely systemic problems. Honestly, I really do think that it did, and there's more issues than people want to admit that came from that. Um, Especially because more northern states were sundown towns than southern states were. That's pretty disgusting. But I do think you can learn and rebuild, and that we have the tools to do that. And I think if you look at what the Civil War taught us is that you had a nation divided, one part of it won, and then a lot of the people sided with those that won, whether they liked it or not. And yet, did they try to subtly do things in the background to fuck with it, right? And these things, yes. But overall, as a societal nation, there was a majority that wanted to move forward with removing slavery from the ranks. And I don't know. And I agree with you.
Like they had the war, and then they went with an incrementalism after the war. It was a pretty good sized jump, but they granted all kinds of self freedoms. They didn't send all of the people who were in charge in the Confederacy to prison to shut down that whole thing. Like the Civil War was a really aggressive case of incrementalism, in my opinion. It's just like it's just a thing. Like it's a nasty situation, and there's no one answer. And then there's probably people way smarter than me that'll have an answer for it. I think it'll take, like let's say the president loses and the Proud Boys are in the streets waving weapons and shooting, and like they draw the first fire. Then, the response is not going to be the response from the left should be more aggressive. But I really think that if it's something like that, like if you know what I mean, like I want them to be the aggressors to start it, because I think that's what it would take. If we flip everything, they're thinking that the Senate and the presidency will be flipped in this next election. Like a bunch of people are really being positive and thinking that like there's some serious changes that can be made quickly when you have all three branches. And I would love to see that be the way that these major changes happen. And then after that, I mean, if nothing happens and it's just as bad as this, I mean, I'm curious to see if the movement will continue and survive all the way through to the next, that next presidential election. So 4 years from now or 5 years from now, can we sustain it, or will Biden be subject to these riots? That's what I've heard, is that Biden's in, we're going to riot on day 2. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to protest on day 2 of Biden's presidency. Now change it. Get in here and do it. And so if he doesn't do anything, then, that's an even more example that there is no party in this country that is willing to sacrifice to help those people.
And I agree.
Then there may be like, that is an exhausted situation where it does take something more. And I don't know what the tipping point would be, but for me, in my opinion, I would not take to the streets aggressively until either President Trump burns it down, or President Biden just does nothing. It'd take those two things before it would be serious for me.
Fair enough. Keith, been very quiet.
Yeah, well, I got distracted by my quick save. I was just pulling it up so I could discuss it and noticed some details and clicked on the tweet from the organization and then fell down a rabbit hole. And yeah, it's the idea of, as Hannah was saying there, incrementalism versus absolute revolution. I mean, incrementalism is a nice idea, but there's a big problem with that, and that is the fact that we have people dying, and we need to find some way to circumvent that. And unfortunately, baby steps, while we want to sit here, and I mean, from our position of privilege, sit here and say, small steps are still steps in progress. Our lives aren't the ones that are on the line. We're not worried about our identity being denied to us, or about our healthcare being denied to us because of the color of our skin, what we have, our plumbing between our legs, our gender identity. We don't have that as white cis men here. And I as much as I want to say, like, incrementalism will be the best, I can't confidently stand behind that, because that's not my call to make. That's not my life on the line. I want to support those lives who are on the line. I want to fight. I haven't bothered to learn her name, but the appointee that's supposed to replace RBG, who is just the biggest slap in the face of Ginsburg's legacy. I want to be part of the fight against that oppression, because I don't want to continue to see what we keep seeing, which is women's rights, making a couple of steps and then gradually being scaled back by incremental steps backwards. I can't firmly say that I think incrementalism is the way. I mean, I do think it's going to be a big revolution. I think there's going to have to be a major transition of power for these big changes to get made, because we keep seeing, we've seen a lot of major progress, but the problem is that in order for us to say, incrementalism is the way to go, we have to look people in the eye and say, you're gonna have to be willing to lay down your life. I don't have to lay down mine, but you have to lay down yours, and I want you to lay down yours, so my privilege isn't totally interrupted. And I think that's the problem with wanting to lean on incrementalism. I mean, it's a nice idea on paper, but in practice, there's so much more being lost, and we can't afford that. We can't afford that anymore. We need to see a big transition of power in not just, your country or my country, but the world. And the golden rule ultimately seems to be what's winning out today, and that is whoever has the gold makes the rules. And that's the problem, because we keep seeing people with all the gold making all the rules for everybody else, and then they don't have to follow them, and everybody else pays the price. So revolution, man. Vive la revolution.
Yeah. Well,
Breonna Taylor's murderers
when we did that to Canada? I think we did that to Canada once. At least in South Park we did.
That was an acid trip and a half, man.
Yeah, I'm not going to play that song because we'll immediately get dinged on YouTube. I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Keith, and I think, a lot of people share the sentiment. And, Hannah, your voice is not unheard. It's the, how do I navigate this, because you have daughters, you have a wife, you have family, you have all these other things.
It's a quick call out. It's just, it's really easy to say you want that revolution.
Yeah.
It is.
I mean, it's easy to say either way.
Yeah, to say it, but for you guys get your concealed weapons permits and go out there on a Tuesday afternoon and do it. I mean, I know there's guys that I see online that are doing it. They're actually out there doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us tonight on Stellar Door Skeptics. I'm canceling quick saves. Sorry, gentlemen. I'm canceling quick saves because it's very late in the night. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be back next week with double quick saves and the two of these lovely gentlemen's faces. Thank you all, and have an amazing night.